I have weighed all the aggravating and mitigating factors that apply to each of you. Although I have taken the same starting point, I have concluded that the final minimum terms must be different. In Scarlett's case, the aggravating features are significant and would have led to a substantial uplift to the starting point, but for the mitigation, particularly that relating to maturity and mental disorder. There must still be an uplift, but it will be moderated. In Eddie's case, I find that the balance to be struck between aggravating factors, which are not quite as high as in Scarlett's case, and the mitigation I have identified is such as to cancel each other out. In saying that, I have taken account of all the medical evidence and accept the diagnosis of ASD has some impact, but the extent to which it reduced your culpability in the circumstances of this offending is limited. This was undoubtedly a very serious offence with multiple aggravating factors. That is the context in which I impose minimum terms which are lengthy for offenders of your age, albeit significantly less than an equivalent sentence for an adult. The parole board will have to decide if and when either or both of you can be released. That will only happen if you no longer pose a danger. If you are released, you will remain on licence for life and you may be recalled to prison. I will now sentence each of you. You may remain seated. In both cases, the relevant statutory surcharge will apply. Scarlett Jenkinson, for the murder of Brianna Ghey, you will be detained at His Majesty's pleasure. I set the minimum term at 22 years, less the 352 days that you have spent on remand. Eddie Ratcliffe, for the murder of Brianna Ghey, you will be detained at His Majesty's pleasure. I set the minimum term at 20 years, less the 352 days that you have spent on remand. Please take the defendants to the cells and their legal teams will come and see them before they go to begin their sentences. Thank you.
Hello, you're watching BBC News and we've been bringing you live coverage from Manchester Court, where the two killers of 16-year-old Brianna Ghey have just been sentenced. And we can go live now to our correspondent, Rowan Bridge, who's outside Manchester Court for us. Rowan, just tell us a bit more about these sentences from the judge.
Yes, well, quite severe sentences, really. If you think of the age of these children when they committed the crime, they were both 15 years old at the time. They're now both 16 years old, but 20 years and 22 years for the two of them, for Ratcliffe and Jenkinson. The judge ran through sort of some of the reasons that she gave such stiff sentences for what are children, basically, who are going to spend the next 2 decades in prison. Addressing Jenkinson, she said that Jenkinson's primary motivation was a desire to kill, calling the murder exceptionally brutal. And the judge said, "You enjoyed the killing," adding that it was a murder involving sadistic conduct. And addressing Ratcliffe, she said, "You knew what Scarlett wanted you to do and why. I find that you were motivated in part by your distaste of Brianna's status as transgender." And said that both took part in a brutal and planned murder. The judge went on to talk about the nature of the crime, the sort of sadistic nature of it, the level of brutality involved, the fact that this was a crime that was carried out in broad daylight in a park on a Saturday afternoon near Warrington. So clearly the judge felt that these were really significant crimes that deserved significant sentences, and that's what we've seen reflected here. Jenkinson, 22 years, Ratcliffe, 20 years, given that the judge felt that there were more mitigating factors acting in his defence, but both of them face a very long time in jail. And bear in mind, those are minimum terms that they will have to serve. At that point, it will be up to the parole board to decide whether they are eligible or not for release. Now, the judge did say that she hoped that there was a chance of rehabilitation for both of them, but they are facing 20 years at least each in jail going forward.
And Rowan, just repeat for us, there was a difference in the sentences for Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe. So 22 years for Scarlett Jenkinson and 20 years for Eddie Ratcliffe. Do you have any more reasons as to why there is a difference in the sentences for the two teenagers?
So I think that comes down to what they feel as sort of motivating and mitigating factors in those cases, like what was their role in it, how significant was their role in it, how much were they involved in the killing, how much were they the driving factors behind it, and also their sort of mental ability and whether the fact that, for example, Ratcliffe was diagnosed with autism was a factor that could act in his mitigation. But clearly the judge feels that both of them have committed extremely serious offences, and she said that she was that both of them were clearly integrally involved in the murder and therefore should face significant sentences as a result of that. I should just add, we've had some notes from Judith Moritz in court saying that neither of the defendants showed any emotion in court when the verdicts were returned. They are in the courtroom along with Brianna Ghey's family, and indeed Ratcliffe and Jenkinson's family are also in the courtroom. At the moment there's about 50 people in that courtroom as the judgment was handed down.